Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Illiterate. This week we are covering CODA. My name is Evan. I checked out the Best Picture winner.
My name is Taylor, and I went into census documents from the 1690s.
Oh, Lord.
Let's get into it.
Imagine where we will go from here. The Oscars happened this week, and everybody's been talking about the talk, obviously. We ain't here for that. We are here for the big winner, baby, CODA. And it also took home Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Supporting Actor. In particular, Tony Custer's acceptance speech was affecting and pretty amazing to balance out all of the awfulness.
Yeah.
If you want to go look up something amazing that happened, go look up his acceptance speech and the audience reception to that. It was actually quite heartwarming to see. And from that instance, I was like, oh, maybe CODA's really something. I should check this out. That was first thought. And then she wins Best Adapted, and then it wins Best Picture. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm checking it out.
And so you, dear listener, can watch this. It's streaming
on Apple Plus. It's streaming right now.
Very interesting. Focuses on CODA, which is the child of deaf adults. Also, the main character's brother is deaf, but very much about the deaf community. And as I was looking into this, there's a slogan that's used particularly in the deaf community, but in other marginalized communities. And the slogan is "Nothing about us without us."
Oh.
So very much that was an aim on this piece, is as many people in as many facets as we can get that actually have this life experience. Made me interested and made Evan interested in who wrote it and then who directed it. The same person, Sean Hayter, but she is not deaf and seemingly doesn't have a ton of experience in this. So it's kind of like usually the opposite of what we talk about, where it's like, oh, you live this experience and you writing about what you know.
Things find you.
Right. Yeah. This is very much her doing research on communities she doesn't belong to, and opening up that lens, which is not usually what you see when there's something so personal. You'd think, oh, surely she was a child of deaf adults. No, not at all.
Yeah, that's definitely my first inclination, was wondering how much, balancing how much is this a person from the deaf community and how much of like a artist filmmaker is this person, or is there more fidelity in there? If maybe she's a much more curious person.
So
I'm interested in what all sorts of what other stuff. What does she do?
so there are, of course, has to be personal connections to her and the place. She grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and had vacations in Gloucester, and this whole area she very much knows. The house of the music teacher was one of her friend's houses as a kid. So there's a few connections there. She has been in film, acting, writing. She won a Peabody for her writing on the TV show Men of a Certain Age, and was one of the main writers in seasons 1 through 3 of Orange is the New Black. On Netflix, which she was never a woman in prison. So that kind of started her. I'm going to do tons of research on something. She was the research nerd, because she was like, I'm going to be on a Homeland Security watch list. I'm looking up how to make a bomb in prison.
Right. And then you acquire those types of skills of being able to track down the source of like, well, what is a thing? And then you realize you can kind of do that in a bunch of different directions. And so we found it here. What is another world I can really sink my claws into and get to the roots of, to understand? And in particular, what's a world, what's a community that needs that light?
Yeah, so that's all TV stuff. The way she gets into film, her first feature film was called Tallulah, which premiered at Sundance, I believe. And this then is where we get, like you said, it was adapted screenplay based on something. So now
this is one of the big things about this that I've seen nobody mention. This film is a remake. That is kind of on the surface when it won. Obviously, one adapted screenplay. Okay, so it's from something, and that's obvious. It wins. That we're going to do it. When I look at it, it goes, oh, this is a remake. There's another movie.
And the only hint of that was the producers that accepted the award for Best Picture have a French accent, because they are the same producers. It was a French film.
Fascinating.
And so they also then produced CODA, because they, of course, have the American English rights to it. So how did they get together? This was kind of hard to find, but the French film came out in 2014, La Famille Bellier, which is the Bellier family, basically, is just the name of the family. Pretty successful at the French box office, earned 72 million on a budget of 13 million.
Okay.
But I went into some more French box office numbers. Of course, the American movies that came out were higher, the big blockbuster, Planet of the Apes, whatever came out in 2014. But of the French-made movies, this was in the top 5 highest grossing for 2014. So it wasn't a small. I mean, I think it was still a smaller thing, but it did really well.
If you were in France,
yeah,
you would definitely recognize this.
Definitely. And so Sian Heder was at Sundance with Tallulah, her first feature in 2016, and these guys approached her and said, "Would you be interested in doing a remake of the thing that we did that got a bunch of buzz in 2014?" So that's the connection there. And
fascinating.
They were giving her the license because the original story, I'll post a link to the trailer in the show notes. It looks very, very similar, although it's set on a rural dairy farm in France instead of a shipping town in Massachusetts, but similar.
But the inherent drama is it's a deaf family with one child that can speak, and this child is pursuing singing.
Correct. Exactly the same. And a music teacher
directly in conflict with like what is happening in terms of her family. And meanwhile, the family business is trying to understand how it can adapt and stand maybe on its own for the first time. And at this pivotal moment, they need their speaking family member as a vital functioning piece of this family to get up off their feet and move and get this thing going. Is that all pretty much intact?
Yeah, I would say so. Wow. You know, it has the scrutiny that it got versus this one is only the brother character, who is younger and therefore more of a minor character in the French one, he's the only deaf actor. They didn't use any other deaf actors. And so it got more guff in France because it's like these people are actors, but they didn't really learn French Sign Language. And so they're sort of pantomiming. It wasn't that nothing about us without us. It was very much without deaf influence into the story.
I see. Okay. So there was definitely a opportunity to do it more authentically.
Correct. Yeah. I think in the French one, they play more into like the comedy of being deaf, an insensitivity to that.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
Versus having the deaf characters be more fully fleshed out. But I haven't seen the whole thing. But yeah,
interesting because immediately I start to think about how this pulled me into the family drama, and then where our main character Ruby is placed. She has a lot on her shoulders, more than a 17-year-old really should have, in terms of the part she plays in this family business. And because it's such an intrinsic, it's such a guarded place for this family. I mean, you need to be able to trust this person. It can't just be anybody.
Yeah.
In terms of that being that interpreter, the film does an incredible job of getting you to identify with Ruby's plight, of being responsible to a degree for her family. And then because you're so cued in on that so quickly, as auxiliary characters come up and subtly start disrespecting the family, it cuts like a knife, actually, because we're set up with Ruby so quickly and how she's so torn and how much is on her shoulders to keep things going and to make sure things are straight and make sure the truth is told. We're telling the right thing. And they play up with that a little bit, but it's more in the family, not externally. Everybody else, externally, everybody is like confused or, like to an arm's length or totally oblivious. There's way more cutting up and like deaf humor within the family, coming from the family, I would say, in what it sounds like, in contrast to what is in the French version.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that's what I've seen as some of the praises and critiques is competence and sexuality of deaf people in this one is something to praise. That more often than not, portrayals, it's victimizing.
I was absolutely flabbergasted at how sexual this movie is. I just want to, and it's for good reason. They use it incredibly well. It's funny. And I just didn't expect it, and because I didn't expect it, and I realized I didn't expect it, and it's kind of a lot of it, at least in the first act, where I started sitting back and being like, "Oh, interesting." Like what you were just saying, I realized that in the first act, I was going like, "Oh, I am supposed to be like." I'm supposed to be like
called out on your
exactly like they are full human beings, you know. Like so, it was really I was right there with it, 15 minutes in or less.
Yeah, it's on purpose. The one of the big criticisms is sort of the hearing child, which is played up in the drama of it. The hearing child for parents, where interpreters nowadays, because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's mandated. Like if you're in court or if you're in medical, like you have to have an interpreter. So it doesn't make sense that she would be there when her parents are in the hospital and various other things like that. That doesn't make sense anymore in America, at least with these laws. So that part of it gets criticism of like, you're still kind of being like, oh, this world isn't meant for these characters, when in reality, a lot has changed since the 90s.
So perhaps a bit of what is on her shoulders has been addressed.
Yeah.
Since it's, since the thought of putting the narrative down to paper was really done. That's interesting. That's super interesting.
Yeah. And then the music thing, which I didn't realize, like a lot of stories or films, at least, that involve deaf characters also revolve around music, because that seems to be like an obvious conflict, which is another perception that is a bit skewed in this whole premise, because there are tons of deaf people that love music, and they even express that in a way with the dad at the beginning, where he blasts his rap music in the car.
Just because it shakes the whole gets a cool vibration.
And so Sean recognized in writing this, and her intent was to not have it necessarily be, it's not about, oh, her parents don't understand music. It's about connecting with what the kid wants to do that they don't understand. And that can apply if your kid wants to go into the arts, or you're a doctor. It's more about that.
Down to if the family has a thing and there's one person in the family that doesn't want to do that thing, that's drama. And that can be difficult in real life. It can be very, very difficult.
So that's what she was hoping to do when the dad is feeling her throat. It's more about, I understand that you like this, not I don't understand music.
No. Yeah. I read it totally differently than that. I read it as he's trying to fully connect. He's trying to get as close to his hearing it as he possibly can. He the sensation of that is sending off synapses in his mind. It was a very, very beautiful moment, and it wasn't like that didn't play it. It was all about, this whole movie is about like, well, how do I connect with my child, and how do we find common ground even when the world and our interests are pulling us in different directions. But I read it as that very intimate. I mean, he's really trying. To me, I mean, it's all prefaced with, what was the song about? So what was the song about, matched with, can I relate anything in the vibrations here to those emotions that are called up through what she said the thematics of the song were.
And the thematics of the whole thing, I looked into some of the numbers stuff to make sense, because that's just who I am, of the relationships in this, and not that it's just a manufactured thematic drama for the sake of it. So children of deaf adults, 90% of children to deaf adults can hear normally. So this is a huge, in terms of, if you have two deaf parents, 90% chance you're going to have a kid that is not deaf.
Yeah.
And so this is a very common thing. The main actor and actress both have children. This is their scenario. So them acting in this is very much the case.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then on the other side, being born deaf, fewer than 5% of deaf people have deaf parents.
Wow.
So it's an interesting thing in terms of a cultural group, because in this particular case, the deaf culture, most members do not acquire their cultural identity from their parents in a way that other groups would.
That's a very interesting thing that I'm thinking of the brother a lot in this right now, because if I have one disagreement about where the narrative really led me is by the at the end, towards the end, with the brother being upset that she's going to stay. Um, I started to think about the dynamic of his position in the family. And so what you're saying now is that actually the position that he's in is one of the rarest you could be in. And his whole point is that we can do it. We can do it without her, and we should do it without her, which is what he should be turning around and saying to the parents is we have to do this. We should be doing this without her. It's wrong of you to be relying on her in such a way. But it turns on her. And I felt that was a little bit misplaced. And hearing about his position in the family, the dynamic of the brother, and you said that the brother is one of the major changes in terms of like the family dynamic.
Definitely.
I thought that was a really interesting thing. I mean, they obviously all come around, but I thought that his frustration was so misplaced against her.
Yeah,
and I thought it was it relates back to this this plight. He's in such a rare predicament, but I don't even know if he's like giving himself the credit for that. You know what I mean? Like we're looking at the statistics right now, but the character, the person isn't operating with as much grace as maybe we are given, It's like, hold on, things are really hard,
Yeah, it is interesting how it is. That's why it's winning awards, because it's presenting so many facets to what this particular family would be like. Yeah.
You said something earlier that kind of piqued my interest, and I wanted to save it until we kind of got there. And I think we're finally there. The French film. You mentioned French Sign Language, and as soon as you said that, I went, "Oh no," because I don't know enough about sign language in general that I've never even considered ASL is just American Sign Language, not the entire world. And so now I've got 1,000 questions about like, well, what in the world is that like? And how do you adapt? And what's the history of sign language? And I don't know.
I definitely looked into that because I said this is illiteracy in many languages. I know nothing. Yeah, so
this is perfect.
There are 200 distinct sign languages in the world.
Oh my God.
French Sign Language, some might argue, is the biggest and first. So 58% of the signs in American Sign Language are cognates, derivatives of French Sign Language.
Okay.
Linguistic terms, if you hit around an 80% mark, then that's when it would become a dialect. But it's not there yet, so it's its own language. And I didn't even realize, because it's like American Sign Language, not English Sign Language.
Oh, so that opens it up. Whoa, wait, what? Oh no, what?
So American Sign Language would not be intelligible if you were in Britain or Australia. They have their own. It's only maybe 37 to 44% of American Sign Language has similar Auslan, which is the Australian Sign Language.
Oh my God.
Because British...
We are really living up to the title today.
Yeah. So for example, an easy comparison is British Sign Language is like the cardinal one of its origin, which then breaks off into Australian and New Zealand Sign Language, which are also different. But for the finger spelling, which is for specific words that maybe you don't have a sign for, or names, if you don't have a sign name, Australian, New Zealand, British use two-handed finger spelling. So it's a completely different alphabet, essentially. And then you could imagine all over the world, this is why you have 200 sign language, because if you're doing it in Thai, they don't even use, the Latin alphabet or the Romantic languages. So you have to have different connotations. The thing that I teased at the beginning, this 1690 census stuff, this is where this comes in. Because I didn't realize that this is set in Gloucester, because this is where Sean has her upbringing and wants to draw it back to. But this particular area is actually also the start of American Sign Language.
Oh, wow.
And it comes down to, so this is one of these distinct languages that has now disappeared. And you're going to love this. It's Martha's Vineyard Sign Language.
What?
Was its own. Yeah. So as early as 1714, so Martha's Vineyard is an island off of the coast of Massachusetts. And
that's where they shot Jaws.
Yeah. Because deafness is a part of recessive genetics, which means you could pass it on without having it. You could just be a carrier.
Wow.
There was a 4% rate of this being genetic in Martha's Vineyard. And then because it's an island, because it's early on, because of colonization, there was a lot less transference, and there was more families and closer families getting married and having kids. By the mid-1800s, there's even a particular town called Chilmark, and this is my census stuff. One in 25 people in this town was deaf. So
Wow.
one in 25, but what's crazier is 25 of 25 used sign language. This was almost the first language of this area in this time, because it was used by hearing residents when a deaf person was present. Like you said in the movie, when you just get steamrolled, it's like this was equal, because it was also used during church for services, or between boats, or between farmers across fields. Like, it was just the nature of Martha's Vineyard, and specifically this smaller town in it, Chilmark. But like I said, this particular language, the Martha's Vineyard sign language, died out by the 50s because, so this is now explaining how the French one was the biggest. In 1771, there was this first French sign language school, but really was a lot informed by the students who were coming from home and teaching the, the abbey himself who was running it, what they had, there was never a really collated.
Well, this is how it worked at home.
Yeah. And so then he's collating.
Taking notes. Okay.
And so the first American school for the deaf is in Connecticut in 1817. And the largest group of students in the first 70 years were, of course, from Martha's Vineyard, which this merged with the French Sign Language, because the teachers that were coming to this school in Connecticut were from the French school, as well as the kids from their homes in New England that were also going to this school. And so that's how American Sign Language came to be, was in large part French, the Martha's Vineyard version, and then just all the versions that the kids at home are using.
This just like spurred a deep memory from high school when I was videoing basketball, and we would travel all over the state of Georgia. We did go and play the School of the Deaf. I'm totally forgot that we had done that. And what this had just reminded me of is that the only thing that struck me, the only thing that really stood out to me, was that I felt bad that I couldn't communicate. I felt, and I don't know if anybody else did, but I felt how sad it was, because typically you go to a game or whatever, you'll talk to somebody, you'll say, you'll bump into somebody, say sorry, whatever, you'll communicate with people, And it was so, we were so out of place, and it was so humbling to be in that place, be surrounded by that, and that to be the main, that's how they communicate. You go to the concession stand, that's what they're expecting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd totally forgotten that we had done that. And the kind of talking about these schools here, we just like brought that up to the surface. But I definitely remember the only thing I really, really took away from it was that overwhelming feeling of like, I had not done enough.
Yeah, like you want that. Doing the research this week, I was like, and one of our friends is learning American Sign Language, but it's like, I do not have any personal experience, but watching all these interviews and whatnot, I'm like, this is a huge language. And to see like the main actress, Marley, she was on The View, and one of the ladies learned how to say your movie's beautiful. And just, it's like anything, if you go to another country and you learn a little bit of the language, but this is definitely a thing that, this movie brings to the forefront of like, hey.
No, I remember that feeling of like, no, this is my misgiving. This is my shortcomings, and solely my shortcomings.
I should have done the research, learned.
There's nobody to blame but me that I can't go over there and like be friends with somebody,
Yeah. My last little thing about differences, because we talked about different languages, but of course within languages there are dialects. And so American Sign Language has a Black American Sign Language dialect, which
awesome. That's amazing.
Developed because of segregation in American schools. So they're not
No.
Well, you know what I mean? Like the school for
I know.
For the
I
deaf.
was just I just went on the wave of like, I didn't even consider such a thing. How incredible. And then all the reasons why that is a thing are really bad. And,
So
sorry.
It's just interesting knowing a little bit about American Sign Language. So Black American Sign Language, there is a difference. Like if you were in the South, you would have a Southern drawl, or if you're in, just how dialects work, but it's in terms of the physicality of your signing. So adverbs use a larger signing space. in Black American Sign Language. You would be signing further away from your body versus the tight window from your shoulders to your waist to the top of your head.
Wow.
Things like that. Two-handed variants of signs, if they can be done, are more common. And then idioms from African American vernacular English. So like the phrase stop tripping, the sign for tripping and to stop doing that is moved up to the head because the idiom means stop imagining things. It doesn't literally mean stop tripping. So just like stuff like that that is intonated visually is so cool. But that is how dialects from even the languages themselves formulate. So
that is straight up fascinating. I've never even, before we started recording, I was like, yep, American Sign Language.
Yeah.
And I just I'd never given any thought to any other, and even within America, just block out the rest of the world. American Sign Language, I've never given any thought to there being like dialects all throughout the country, and then all throughout the world. This is incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. So that,
but I wonder how would you feel? How do you, if you are a deaf person and you're traveling, I wonder how you bridge those gaps. I mean, I bet there's a ton that's similar, but I bet there's, obviously
it's the same
a lot that's just not.
It's if I were to go to Mongolia, I wouldn't know anything. So
gosh.
So then,
okay.
That will.
I'm thinking about this for the first time. This is amazing.
Well, ruminate on it with me as we talk about Sean and her research, and then she's writing a script for actors.
Yeah.
So then this makes me wonder. 40% of the script is written in American Sign Language. Which, what the heck does that even mean?
What does that mean?
So I looked into this, and there are, symbological ways that you can do this, but essentially that's a more modern and not as utilized convention. It's like it's still written in English with
right. I had just assumed it wouldn't look any different because everybody reads English.
Right.
That was one of the cool parts of the movie is when the brother and the friend are talking to each other at the bar, and they just end up resorting to Texas because it's so much faster.
Yeah,
it was a really cool window into the authenticity of these people's world.
Definitely, yeah. So that's one of the things we were talking about, like adding the ADA requirements for things where it's like you're required to have an interpreter. That's the other thing where it's like, pre-cell phones, you got to bring a pen and paper, or you got like it's technology has made it so much easier in that way. But as far as Sean Hader, she had an ASL teacher. She learned American Sign Language, and then is helped by two deaf collaborators, which she calls her ASL masters, Alexandria Wales and Ann Tomasetti, and they helped her translate the script into ASL. So almost like consultant co-writers, because it's its own language. So like she has the way that she explained the writing process. And I got a lot of my research on this. The Writers Guild in Los Angeles, they have a YouTube channel that has like no subscribers and no views. But it's amazing because they go through with writers, and it's like 2-hour interviews where like page by page, they break down the script and ask really interesting questions about the writing process. So for me and Evan, who are writers, it's like this video I saw has 500 views or something, but I'll post a link.
Oh my God. I never thought that they would, I never thought to look at their YouTube page. I'm going to be running to that.
It's very, very inside baseball as far as being in Los Angeles or being screenwriters.
For sure,
but it's super interesting to understand, well, why did you use this line? How did you pace these scenes? Tons of stuff like that. So this is where I got that from. But she was saying she wrote out the script, but as far as having her collaborators translate it into American Sign Language, and there's a copy of this script since it won. I'll post a link to that as well. You could read it for your own if you wanted to see what she did. But like,
does it have the ASL stuff in it?
Yeah. So where the characters are deaf and are signing is in italics. And essentially she's like, I go to my collaborators and I'm like, well, how would they sign this? And if it doesn't work visually, or if it's not what I'm trying to say, the grammar, syntax, the culture of it, idioms, I'll post a link to another video where somebody sort of analyzes some scenes from the movie, what they're signing, what they're actually saying idiomatically, and what the subtitle is different. So like in American Sign Language, there's an idiom which is true business, which is a very quick thing to sign, but it just means like absolutely or indeed.
Okay.
So it's in the scene where the parents are arguing and it's like Ruby's going away and she's like true business. but that doesn't make sense if you put that in the subtitle. But because it's an idiom that we wouldn't know.
That's very cool. That's brushing up on some of my work because I am a little dub script adapter. So like that exact kind of thing is stuff that I think about. So that's super. And again, even because I do some of that work, I didn't even think about the difference between what they would be signing based on what the subtitle is, and between that might not be what's in the script. I mean, that's really fascinating. So that's awesome.
The script is really for the subtitles, but she has. Because these people that she worked with were also on set. They were her co-directors essentially as well, and were also, from the whole thing. So like production design, how the living room furniture is arranged, because you would not want if you're a deaf family and various things like that. The signs, they're watching the monitor, which is what the camera is showing to make sure this is in frame. A piece of what we're signing, and then in the editing bay, making sure we're not cutting away so that people that are watching this, and that's what they did really well for the Oscars when they were filming the Oscars ceremony. They never cut away from the signers, or the interpreters, because it's so annoying. It's like, well, now it's just like muting, like you just missed.
Yeah.
So these co-collaborators were with it through the whole process to make sure it makes sense from beginning to end.
So cool.
In the flow of the scenes, as well as the actors, Troy, who you had mentioned, who plays Ruby's father, and Marlene, who plays the mom. They had met Sean through Deaf West Theater, which is a theater in L.A. that has deaf cast productions. They do plays, they do musicals, they do everything. So Troy he's done film stuff as well, but that's how she got a lot of her cast and casting was from that. But he also was very, very much, she's like, this character, he really brings the obscenity to this guy signing. And it was originally rated R. And she was like, they will never, like, this is the most blasphemous. It changed to PG-13.
Oh my God.
But Troy has done a lot of stuff. One thing that he's known for recently that just came out because it was more underground, like people didn't know about it, was in the Mandalorian TV show from Disney. He's one of the Tusken Raiders.
Oh, so cool. That's amazing.
And they consulted, he develops so this is another sign language, but the Tusken Raider sign language.
Oh, no way.
Is its own language.
Oh, wow.
And he loved Star Wars, he said, from when he was 8 years old, because it's so visual. It's so exciting and energetic and everything. And so he developed the Tusken Raider symbol to point, like the Mandalorian is based on the letter M and the helmet shape, the T kind of visor.
Oh, that's so cool.
So he's also
I love that.
Making his own languages in sign language for media.
Yeah. Oh man, what an ambassador!
Yeah,
Oh, how incredible!
Amazing.
I mean, I fell in love with him in his acceptance speech. I mean, it's so it was so touching, and the crowd reaction. That alone, I was like, okay, I might want to check it out just for him.
Yeah. And then Marlee Matlin, who plays the mom, she's most known because she has won an Academy Award. She won for Best Supporting Actress in '86. No. Yeah.
She's the other one?
Yeah.
No! That's incredible, because I knew, I know he wasn't the first, and I knew there had been one other.
Yeah. So Children of a Lesser God came out in '86. She is also the youngest. She was 21 at the time. So she won the youngest Best Supporting Actress, and she's been in tons of TV shows. They parodied her in Family Guy, and then she played a character in Family Guy.
Yeah, voice.
Yeah,
she does a voice in Family Guy?
Yeah. So there's tons to it. Yeah, so she's very much. Both of these people have decades in the. It's kind of almost like with Minari. The grandmother is the biggest, actress in South Korea. Yeah.
No, it was just because I'm going on her IMDb page, and one of the last things I'm really expect when I see a voice role, I go, what?
Yeah.
Whoa! I have to think about it for a second. So excuse me. This has just been incredible. This has been I've grown so much. I love this. It's just fascinating.
Yeah. So with getting a sense of American Sign Language with 2 sign language directors, interpreters, the crew, all of that on set, she also then has to get the rest of this town on board, Sean, that is, the director and writer, and say, well, if I'm going to set it here, I got to know things about fishing. I got to know things about singing. Like there's so much. She's the nerd researcher. So she basically reached out to people that she knew and ingratiated herself into the scene in Gloucester. She received feedback from Kenneth Lonergan, who directed Manchester by the Sea in 2016, because that was a very intimate Boston slice of life piece. And he said, you need this Marine coordinator, who she contacted 3 years before this got made. And every time he's like, when are we making this? What are we doing? But she met with the Gloucester Fishermen's Wives Association, and they told her the bars to go to. So she knows when the boats gets in, she goes down to the bars and chats people up. And people say, excuse the language, they say, I don't give a shit about your movie. You know, we did The Perfect Storm. We don't need another movie. And she finally, through a nephew of one of the Fishermen's Wives Association people, meets this guy, Paul Vital, who is a fisherman. And he agrees, fine, you can go on my boat. Meet me at 3 a.m. Don't talk to me. I fish alone. Sit over there. Don't touch anything. Over time, he lets more people on. Soon his boat is the movie set boat. He's like, how the heck did I get in this? Because now there's 7 vessels out there and 100 people. And yeah, I just appreciate the amount of effort to present this story, even though you ostensibly know, it's kind of like our mantras of like, write what you know or write what you're trying to understand.
Right.
And I think this is
she definitely did that on this one. She did the work that I think most people really skip out on. Most people are a little bit too worried about their frame and the color grading. Like, oh, is that move going to be sick?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're like forgetting what the story's about, and like who the main character is.
She learned a language.
The A to B. I know, yeah, man. She learned a language. She learned to fish. She learned to sing. I mean, she put herself through the ringer. And when we talk about directors, we hear about directors going in deep in an aspect, a direction. She went all out. And she went in every direction, as she should. I mean, I think that's the charge of the director. Yeah, she might have went so hard on the research part, she forgot about the movie. Because if I have any criticism about the movie at all, it's down on its technicals. It's not shot really like it doesn't have an air of cinema to it. It's not very cinematic. What is undeniable about it is the narrative, the characters, the performances, and the story. I mean, oh my God. All that, now none of that stuff matters. And that's what you saw on Sunday night when Best Picture comes out, is because this got to the core of the characters, what this family was about, what was going on in this character's head.
Yeah.
And all of the work necessary to actually depict that, Sean did.
Yeah.
And I hear of so few directors actually going and doing all of that work. And again, I'm like, if I have a criticism, she might have just went too hard in the paint on the research and like forgot.
Well, I think also with it, and this is like the culmination of the whole thing, combining, she's also utilizing everybody else around her to make it. So in the final piece,
I love it.
The script, like I said, was co-written by these other gals, and then also the actors, in terms of like scenes where they're improvising in sign language. She's okay with that because
being secure in this. Now, listen, I want to bring this out for people. This is a woman who is doing the work. She's doing the work nobody's doing, but she's also in all those directions. She's leaning on the people, the experts in those areas, and she is so beholden to them and taking their word as what is truth.
Yeah.
And doing the real math here about like, this is important. I need that part of it. Okay, they said that. I can't forget that.
Yeah.
She is so secure in letting those people give their expertise. I think that's something all directors need a little bit more of.
And the final piece of this, the final sign that she does in the script, it's just her saying, I love you in sign language out the car window as she's leaving. In sign language, usually you would finger sign somebody's name, but if it's a family thing or it's a political figure, or it's something where you don't want to finger sign, you would give them a name sign. So it's a particular sign that would be for somebody's specific name. And so she leaned on the actor, Troy, the dad, to give the Ruby sign to her, his daughter in the thing. And so the sign for Ruby is it's the letter R and the letter Y, and then also mixed with the word for where. So anytime he signs her name, it's literally like, where's Ruby? Like that's that's what her name sign means.
Yeah.
But what's crazy is that sign is also I love you mixed with forever, where you cross the two fingers. So she's literally signing her name, where's Ruby, and also signing I love you forever while she's leaving at the end of the movie, which is a mixture of her deaf culture and who she is and where she's going and that she's leaving all in one visual, physical thing. And so the director had to have all of those pieces because in the script, she just had it as I love you. But what does that mean?
Yeah.
Unless you have all of the other pieces put together.
Yes.
For all the themes. So I just love that.
No, it's got to come from that familial place. The dad's his sign for his child.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key there that makes it authentic. It's not her saying goodbye, you know.
Yeah.
It is here is my name and I'm using it. It happens to also mean this amazing other thing. But it is the sign given to me from my parents.
Yeah.
You know, like it's so much more than just I love you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, incredible work, Taylor.
Oh,
I really appreciate it. You really, I mean, not only did Sean go hard in the paint, but you went hard in the paint, my friend. Good Lord, this was a blast. I had no idea exactly what to expect in terms of going into the movie even. So like for this to be such a breath of fresh air, that really inundating me into a whole other world I'd never thought about. All these dialects, all over the country, all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how lovely. This is why this movie deserves to be thrust into the spotlight, because we ought to be considering these things a bit more. Thank you guys for listening to us. If you're stuck with us, please reach out to us at IlliteratePod on Instagram. Let us know what you are watching. Let us know what you are reading. You never know when we'll do an episode that you're just gonna die. So get in touch with us.
If you could please rate on whatever podcast player you're using, give us 5 stars. That would be lovely, however many stars you want to give.
And suggest an episode to somebody. Send one of our episodes to somebody if you feel led to do so. We love doing this. We can't wait to be back next week. Thank you guys for sticking with us. We will see you then.